Hey guys, I'm Kate, welcome back to my channel, and way back in December of 2020, I let my patrons choose a writing experiment for me, and Neil Gaiman's Masterclass just ran away with it. Everyone wanted that one. Now, unfortunately, I had a lot of really crazy life stuff happen around that time, so I did not get it done in December, nor January, February, March, or April, but it is May. And it is done. So here is the Neil Gaiman Masterclass vlog, and I will pop in at the end to share with you all the best lessons that I learned. I do love this effect. It's like my little cauldron's bubbling. I have with me this morning pins, a notebook, my computer, coffee, puppies. Oh, I would actually like to go to this class at some point. I'd like to add. But no, we are not here for Ron Finley. We are awake early this Saturday morning for Neil Gaiman. So let us start with the introduction. Oh, the dramatics, I love it. I always wonder how people feel about shooting these dramatic scenes. They're like, just walk here and look pensive. But he's doing it beautifully. Ugh, how cool would this be? I know in some respects that they need to sort of sell the course or sell some authority on the topic. Even though a lot of these people have huge names, there is still going to be some amount of people who's like, I don't know who that person is, or why should I listen to them, or whatever. So that's what this montage really felt like in part, or at least when we got to the part with all of his books and his comics and stuff. You know what? You did sell me, okay? I was sold. Oh, that's cool. Teaches the art of storytelling.
I'm going to give you a little push forward that you might not have had. Hello, I'm Neil Gaiman, and this is my masterclass.
We're jumping right in, truth and fiction. Make this big.
That you lived in 30 or 40 years ago, and the first time you're there, everything seems very strange, and then you go, hang on, if you go down here, that's that road, and all of the spaces suddenly start to make sense again. You haven't been there for a long time, you didn't even think you knew it, but it's in there waiting for you. So writing yourself and going back to your own past and visiting your own past, as a writer, you're not writing autobiography. What you're doing is lying.
So let's look here at the lessons. 19 videos, so it's 4 hours and 49 minutes total. Sources of inspiration, finding your voice, developing the story. Story case study, the graveyard book. Short fiction case study, March tale. Dialogue and character case study, October tale. World building, descriptions, humor, genre, comics. Dealing with writer's block, editing, rules for writers, the writer's responsibilities. Now, I've taken one masterclass before. It was James Patterson's, and I'm excited to take some more after this. There's a lot of really exciting ones that they've added, and of course they already had so many that looked wonderful. But what I remember from the James Patterson one is that there wasn't a lot of like potentially strict advice. It felt more inspirational and perhaps aspirational than it was, you know, a bullet point checklist of things to do. And I have to imagine that a lot of the master classes will be similar. I think often once we get outside the mechanics of writing, the actual storytelling aspects can be really hard. I say all of this to then show you that I wrote an entire page of notes on that first 20-minute lesson, where the main message can be boiled down to what he reiterated at that in there, which is that you have to be willing to tell the truth. And he goes on about how the great thing about stories is that they are the truth, but you're using lies, people that don't exist, things that didn't happen, and places that aren't real. So you're doing all of that to ultimately tell the truth, this human truth, right? And he also alludes to the truth always needing to be like a condiment or the seasoning in something. So the truth is always there while everything else is lying. But I really love that. I really appreciate it. During that, he also had this bit about how he was told that Coraline was unpublishable, which I found really interesting. James Patterson had similar stories of being told that something he was doing was not publishable or wouldn't sell or blah blah blah. And it just kind of reinforces this idea that though there are certain publishing aspects at work, this shouldn't be like, you shouldn't be trying to hit this or feel boxed in by what publishing is right now, because even the people in publishing, they don't necessarily know it. I'm not saying everyone's a Neil Gaiman or a James Patterson, but I think that's true, especially because I had to look this up. Coraline was the fifth novel that he published, and the other ones were already like relatively popular. Like Stardust has already won awards at this point, and he'd obviously written a bunch of short stories at that point too, so yeah, it's just interesting. I do like how he went a third of the way through Coraline before he had the Yellow Jacket story that he shared, and then that's when he realized the ultimate message of Coraline, what he wanted to tell or what he wanted to say with this story. And I think that's really beautiful. I'm still someone who feel like I have to zero draft in order to figure out what I want to say, but ultimately using that zero draft, I do find what I'm trying to say. Or I find the other truth that I'm trying to tell, kind of thing. So anyways, it's just always nice, again, how this is more inspirational and aspirational, to hear someone that you look up to saying that they didn't have it all figured out at the beginning. Not much coffee left. Oh, 2 gulps though. So the second lesson is called Sources of Inspiration, and one of my favorite things is that he says we as writers hate the question, where do you get your ideas from? Because we ourselves don't know where we get our ideas from. He basically talks about how all ideas for stories come from confluence, two separate things coming together. And that's why he recommends having a compost heap. Just stuff you like, stuff you're inspired by, little nuggets, conversation you've ever heard. Just kind of put it in this compost heap, put it away, make note of it. And then at some point you can look back over it. It's like both a metaphorical and like a real compost heap, like maybe on your computer, but also just in your brain. I thought that was really interesting because I have never liked the where do you get your ideas from. I always say that I have a surplus of ideas, and I think maybe it's just because I'm inspired by a lot of different things, and I just have lots of little nuggets in my compost heap. Whether they're good nuggets or not is a completely different thing, but they are there. I also love that in the second lesson he has an actionable sort of exercise that you could try, which is just taking a folk tale that you know pretty well and turning it on its head. He gave the example of Snow White and how he like realized he saw it from a different angle finally, rather than what he's been told all his life. And he's like, they kind of sound like vampires. Technically on the Masterclass website, on the community page, it says chapter 3. I think just because they include chapter 1 as like the intro, and they do have writing exercises that they've written out, and for this chapter it is the one that he mentions in the lesson, but they also have additional ones. I think these are fine if you like the community feel of it more. I think it's worthwhile to do on your own, certainly. It's just something to keep in mind. I left myself some notes with brackets saying insert this thing. So I'm debating adding this chapter back into the first chapter because there's a specific scene I want to leave off with, I think will have more impact. So let's do it. I was still in the zone, I forgot to take a sip. But I finished that chapter, and now it's time for the first case study. I'm really excited. Ooh.
So what characters want and what characters need always drive every story. They always drive how the character behaves, what's going to happen, how they interact with other characters.
Interesting time for it to pop up. Has made a positive impact on my life. You know what? I'm gonna say agree. Oh. I don't know about either of these yet necessarily. I think sometimes some of these skills take a while to sort of sink in. So I'm just gonna say this for now. You're welcome. I hope you ask me again at the end. Now we're on short fiction. This is reminding me though. The graphics on this, I don't know who did it. It's beautiful. All of the topography is really beautiful, but also when they were illustrating as he's reading sort of the first chapter in the graveyard book or parts of the first chapter, stunning visually. It was really nice. So then you also have Neil Gaiman and Neil Gaiman's voice reading and explaining, you know, the wants and the needs of the character, driving that story forward and setting up everything, and wonderful.
A good short story is a magic trick. It's close-up magic.
I really loved the quote that he shared when he was talking to another short story writer that he really looked up to, and was like, what is your advice, basically? And the guy told him that I put my best short stories at the end of novels. It's treating all the short stories as if we've been with these characters this whole time. We know them. They feel so fleshed out and real. And now we are at the point of action. It's all coming together. It's, you know, it's the final push. It's the end. It's the wrap up. And that's how you treat a short story. And something about that feels very light bulb-esque to me. I also love that compared to the James Patterson Masterclass, he's able to share a lot more of his fiction in full because he's of course done short stories. He shared that first chapter. Like, there's just more examples of his own work that I think either he's able to share better or it just fits into the like lesson plan better, that I really appreciate. So he shared his 100-word short story that was awesome, but it's kind of inspired me to maybe attempt like a weekend of just trying very short, very short stories. I think it would be really fun. I also love this moment that he said, instead of being paid by the word, I am paying by the word. And that's how you keep it short and sweet and treating it that way. And I think that's a genius little hack there.
You've got 16 minutes and 47 seconds remaining.
The perfect amount of time.
Some years ago,
Okay, so inspired by Neil Gaiman, I have a couple of ideas for writing experiments that would be fun. So I'm gonna let my patrons vote on it for May, and we're gonna see how it goes. Woo!
there are two ways you can introduce a character. They can be static or they can be on the move.
All right, and now we are at, oh, you can't see it. We're at Buc-ee's. One of the things I thought was so interesting was how Neil Gaiman said that dialogue is character, and he really reinforced that. He later had his October tale that he shared that was a short story. It was a short story. It was both a short story and it was short for being a short story. But I've never quite thought of it that way. Dialogue is character. Dialogue is one of my favorite things, so I'm biased here. But he was explaining how dialogue is the thing that shows you the character the most. It's what they focus on, what they care to share, how they phrase something, and that is the thing he focuses on first. So he'll even write out like a page of just their dialogue. And I write a lot of things from first person if I'm writing contemporary romance, and so their inner dialogue is what gives them the character too, them telling the story. So anyways, I loved it. Had a couple other really good nuggets in there, but that's the part that really stayed with me. I'm ready for the snacks. Hello, I'm in Houston. There's truly an impressive amount of road noise. We're actually like just off the highway, so I'm in town for a wedding. I drove my friend up here. She's in the bridal party and she's actually getting ready right now for the wedding. We had the rehearsal last night. So anyways, I have a few hours to myself and I'm sneaking in some more of the masterclass courses. Also, these are off center. It has been bothering us this whole time. I'm of the opinion that not everything needs an app, but I genuinely like having the masterclass as an app.
Think about the places that you've been.
Now we're on to world building.
And then change them. Make them bigger. Make them smaller. If you're somebody who's only ever been to school and you think you have nothing to write about.
Okay. I'm pausing halfway through the episode to say that I love the always know more than you share with the reader kind of philosophy. And to have your characters learn the rules along the way. And he likens it to our very real world, where we don't learn as a child that like the stove is hot after something's being cooked on it or is currently being cooked on it until we touch it, right? And so that's how you should let your reader learn, is through the characters also learning the rules of the world. Like there is really no guidebook, there's no handbook that we are given. Therefore, don't give it to the readers, show it to them. Yeah, something that I've kind of heard before, but I appreciated the way he kind of, you know, as he's going through these motions of explaining the world building, is basically like, you can describe one mountain in such detail that everything else fades into the background, so that when you tell us there are more mountains, we believe you. Be believable in this one thing, and like, we'll take your word for the rest kind of thing. Unsurprisingly, he said it better, but let's go ahead and get back to Neil Gaiman.
And that's okay.
It is okay.
I remember Stephen King once said to me that Amy Tan grumbled to him that when writers get interviewed, the one thing they don't ask us about is the words. 4 lard-filled suitcases as opposed to 4 suitcases filled entirely with lard. The lard, being the funny word, comes at the end.
All right, quick break. We are going to move around Pam's stuff. We're doing this the lazy way. Oh no. Why can't I just be lazy? All right. It's fine. We have a mirror here.
I knew that I had a huge advantage in that the majority of what I was writing as a young writer was comics.
Okay, I am gonna go ahead and say right now that this one on comics is my favorite so far. And I don't know if that's because I just didn't know a lot about comics, so I feel like I'm learning something, but also from someone I respect, so it's like even better. Also because I like to read manga, which is very similar in terms of comics, or in terms of it being a medium for storytelling, which I love that he emphasized that at the beginning of this one, or at the beginning of the genre notion that he started in comics, where you know, it wasn't a genre, but people treated it as a genre, and so he could do whatever he wanted. But he said that people bring themselves to the like silent page. Oh, you know what? Ignore the brushes.
In prose, you cannot have a silent panel. You are talking. But in comics, you get moments when nobody is saying anything. Everything is still, and they act as punctuation. They can act as a beat. They can act to underscore something. They make your audience, they make your reader contribute.
Okay, sorry, I was balancing on my legs. A little bit shaky, but I love that. I love that so much. Anyways, I'm really excited to finish it. I'm only halfway through this episode. Still gotta finish the face.
The script.
Okay, I'm now on the writer's block section, and it took me a while to learn this tip that he just is casually mentioning here. And for me, sometimes I feel like I have to learn something by doing it. I have to learn by failing, but if anyone can like watch his course and take any of these lessons, frankly, and like just learn from there, that would be phenomenal. But he talks about how with writer's block, what you can do besides just getting up and moving and like taking some space away from the story is to reread your work. Because what you're gonna find is that you always went off the rails sooner. You will inevitably find when you stopped going in the direction you wanted, and it's always before the writer's block, or what I like to call the story block, hit. And he makes the analogy that it's like a car that has quite literally gone off the rails, gone beyond the rails, has crashed. And it's not the crash site that was the cause of the crash, right? It's not this moment here, it happened before. That's what caused the crash. So similarly, where you start going off the rails is a little bit, maybe a lot of it, before you start having that like paralyzing story block. Anyways, it took me a very long time to learn that lesson, and I don't know that it always necessarily helps you figure out exactly what the solution is, but being able to pinpoint where the problem starts, and by solution I mean fixing it, you will now have an easier time at telling what the problem overall is if you know when it happened. Okay, I'm excited. We're nearing the end. I texted the boyfriend and told him he'd like the comics episode.
Now you're stuck there.
It's the final lesson! Ah. I really love that one, mostly talking about rejection. I have a few bits that I'm going to replay on loop. Yeah, it was just inspirational, so I'm excited to see what Neil Gaiman wants me to do. What's my job, Neil? What is it? I am gonna miss this music.
How can you write a book of horror for a 7-year-old child? I can say I can do it as best as I possibly can, because there are kids out there who need to know that they'll get through this.
Okay, so I can say without hesitation that I preferred this Neil Gaiman Masterclass over the James Patterson one. I mentioned in the vlog that part of the reason was because I think he was better able to share, you know, his own writing, kind of emphasize the points that he was making along the way. It really helped compound the lessons that we were learning. I just loved the case studies. They were wonderful. I think I also preferred it because it was all about storytelling as a whole, which means that he focused on more mediums than just the novel writing aspect. You know, obviously the comics I think was my favorite lesson of his, besides the case studies, which again, phenomenal. I know little to nothing about the creation of comics other than I understand that you would still need to, you know, have these storytelling aspects, and I do read graphic novels. Doesn't mean I know how to write one. In fact, the entire process was fascinating. It was so cool. I think I will be rewatching that one multiple times over just to see if I can grasp more of it. It's encouraging me to actually go and look up how other people collaborate on comics. So cool, so cool. It's nothing like what I would have expected, the amount of notes that he gives the artist and then the freedom the artist has and then how he goes back over it, and the fact that you only want to put surprise panels on one side because of the way people will flip things. Like, there's just these considerations that I would never have thought of. So anyways, now with the exception of the comics, it's not like I was learning anything new necessarily. He might have put things in a better way than I'd heard before, or I might not have heard someone put this kind of thing in words, but I would still label this as much more inspirational and aspirational than it is like a concrete lesson plan. But ultimately, I kind of think that's how writing in general goes. You know, you learn by reading a lot, you learn by writing a lot, you learn by mixing it up, you learn by consuming other kinds of mediums and getting a fuller grasp of what storytelling is. But please do comment down below. Let me know if you've taken Neil Gaiman's masterclass. Let me know what Neil Gaiman books you've read. Let me know if you've ever written a comic before, if you draw comics. But that is gonna be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you once again to my patrons for selecting this. I enjoyed it immensely, and I'll see you all very soon with a new video. Bye. It was really good. Oh, someone just parked kind of close to me.